Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Liverpool Connection podcast. This is the Story podcast. I am Daz. If you just tuning in for the first time, I'm by me, Todd, again. Steve's out and about doing his thing. Just want to say everybody like and subscribe, all that good stuff. If you have not checked out our 3rd-year anniversary with Jan Molby, please do. It was a cracking chat with her, a Liverpool legend, and another one ticked off my bucket list. Also coming out this week, another Liverpool legend. I had a good chat with Ray Houghton. So look out for that. But really chuffed to have today's guest on. First-time author, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, first time.
Which is rather nice. I like having these first-time authors on. But brand new book out from Pitch Publishing, which is some of our mates are on. Jeff Goulding, who has put so many books out on Pitch Publishing about Liverpool. But this one is called Spice of Life. The story of Liverpool's 1990s Renaissance. And we've got the author. He's also written for These Football Times, which is another one of my favourite ones. Stephen Scragg, one of our podcast guests from a couple of years ago, writes for them as well. So if you haven't checked that out, please go check These Football Times out. But we welcome Jonathan Aspey. How are you, mate? I know we've been talking for the last 20 minutes about life, kids, and all that good stuff. But great to have you on. Great to have the record button working. So all good.
No, good to be with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Want to start? You are from the northeast, so I'm from the northwest, obviously, right outside of Liverpool, for me. So I know you're not a Liverpool supporter, like by heart, by born and bred. You do love Liverpool. So tell me about that then. Growing up in the northeast, and because there are many football teams around you. So how come Liverpool got into your life?
Yeah, I'm kind of weird in terms of football. I have loads of teams that I absolutely love. Some obviously were more than others. But obviously, like where I'm from in the northeast, you kind of got around. You've got Middlesbrough, you've got Sunderland, you've got Newcastle. I've got some in my family that support Sunderland. My mates support Newcastle and Borough. I've just always been brought up like loving football. My granddad is where I get my love of football from. My dad will openly say he's not got a lot of interest. If it's on and it's like a big thing, he'll watch it, but otherwise he would never seek it out. Whereas my granddad is like obsessed. He's obsessed with Sunderland, which I think for him is a lifelong, I wouldn't say a passion, a lifelong chore. But he just gave me loads of like videos and anything that he could about football when I was younger. So my first exposure to Liverpool was probably he gave me a goal of the season. I remember mentioning this in the forward. He gave me a goal of the season video. And one of the big things I remember from that video, because it's like an old VHS, which now makes me sound old. But it had loads of Liverpool goals in general from that time period, because it goes through the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. So in the 70s and 80s, there's obviously so many great Liverpool goals. But I always remembered the 87-88 team because that year, the BBC, they were so dominant and so good. The BBC dedicated the entirety of goal of the season to them. So every single goal is just an amazing team goal that team scored. So like as a kid, I always had this appreciation for Liverpool. It always like stuck in my mind. I always knew it was a special club. I'd never been down to Liverpool or anything like that as a kid, but I always had this attachment and connection to it. I think like as a kid, I couldn't really watch loads of, we've been speaking, haven't we, about, TV in terms of sport in this country. I couldn't particularly get Sky Sports as a kid. So behind me is an Italian shirt. Like the majority of what I watched as a kid was Italian football on Channel 4, Gazzetta Football Italia. So like as a kid, I'm kind of a little bit out of touch with a little bit like modern English football. I have clubs I like and I'm attached to, but I'm not following it, whereas I'm following Italian football every single week. But then as I got older, I got Sky, I was able to watch more and more and more. What I always remember was like solidifying my attachment to Liverpool. And again, like I'd always had it as a kid, but I remember watching, it's one game and it always jumps out at me. And when people ask me like, what's my favourite Liverpool game? Like, I think it's probably a strange one to mention, but it's the game against City at Anfield on the anniversary of Hillsborough, the year that Liverpool were going for the title. And I still just like that was the point. I remember watching, because obviously at that point I then as an adult knew all about Hillsborough, knew the story, knew everything that happened with it, and the just ridiculous lack of justice that any of the 97 have received for that. So I knew all about it, and I remember watching it, and like it hit me. It's just like, and I can't really explain it, like, but it hit me watching it. I remember tearing up just watching the Cop absolutely belt out "You'll Never Walk Alone," and then the game itself on top of that was just Liverpool were going for the title. I knew how much it meant for this like great club to be kind of returning back to the perch effectively. And from then on, it's just been that connection with Liverpool. When I started writing, as you said, for these Football Times, I wrote like a range of stuff. So I wrote about Torino first. I think that was the first article I wrote for them. I wrote about Eastern European football because that's an interest that I've got relating to history and things like that. And then I wrote about the 87-88 team for Liverpool. That was the first thing I'd ever written about Liverpool. And from there on, it was just like something clicked with that article. I remember Jamie Carragher retweeting it on his Twitter, and it just like something clicked with that article. So from then on, it was just like Liverpool. Liverpool was like the central club in everything in terms of my football fandom. And then you've got, through the Klopp years and the development of the club back up to the point where until this season it has been. So that's where the connection comes from. It's been a slow journey. So I would never, unlike yourself, I'm not a born and bred like diehard Red or anything like that. But like there is a connection that I can't shift. And when I go to Liverpool now, any time I'm in Liverpool, it just strengthens the connection. I love that city. I love being there. Me and my wife go there as often as we can. The connection just gets stronger now.
Well, I mean, there would have to be a connection especially writing, your first book as well. Because if you're not really connected, it's going to come off in the book. Yeah. It's just going to be facts, and you're just going to go through it and just be like, you can tell the author's just not connected to this. So, obviously, starting out with football is always good. I've kind of got the same. Me dad was totally not into football. Massive rugby. He thought football was for sissies, and it was my granddad as well. Took me to the games and everything. Just wouldn't shut up about Liverpool, the past and all that. And I didn't have time. I mean, I had time for going to the games. I just didn't have time for those stories. And again, that's why I do this podcast. So I get to hear everybody else's stories, and
I get that.
Tell the big man, my granddad, I'm sorry. I'm now listening. Granddad. Yeah. So, but, how do you go about then? Just picking the 90s, because it wasn't a very good time for Liverpool Football Club. I mean, yes, we won, I believe, 4 trophies. I mean, plus with the Super Cups.
Yeah.
The FA Cup, the League Cup, and then a couple of Super Cups. Apart from that, we're in the FA Cup final in 86, 87.
Yes. And then 87, and definitely 87, 88, because that's the one the loss to Wimbledon after that incredible season.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of like why did I pick the 90s? So like I said, like I'd done 87, 88. That's something that I want to come back to as well. Like that's not like done in my mind, but I'd written an article for These Football Times about that. I'd then given it a little bit of time and I'd done 88, 89 with everything that comes along with that season. You know, I didn't do like an analysis of Hillsborough or anything like that because I genuinely don't think that's appropriate. It's not something that someone like me should do. It's something that someone who's an expert should do in Hillsborough. But I did talk about like the impact on the city, the impact on the club, the fact that Liverpool and Everton, you know, really come together in kind of Everton kind of join with us in shared mourning through that period of time. But then it was kind of what to do next. And obviously, like I could write a book about the sort of the latter years of Dalglish's tenure, you know, the kind of the post Hillsborough stuff, which is absolutely something. I know there is actually someone now that's doing that for Pitch Publishing. They're doing a book of the entirety of Dalglish's tenure at the club. But I really wanted to look at like what came afterwards, what came after Dalglish, because it really is. It's such a difficult period for the club. You know, Souness comes in, whether that's the right or wrong decision, people have so many split opinions over. I personally don't think he was the right choice. I think he makes quite a lot of mistakes during his time as manager, which he himself admits. I'm not saying anything I think Graham Souness would himself say. No, Jonathan's completely wrong with that. But I then looked at like, right, well, after that, you get Roy Evans. And you do get like this, whether the success comes or not, because you mentioned like there's the League Cup victory. Yeah, there's that. But other than that, there's not a great, you know, result in terms of trophies. But through Souness, you do get like a decline in the club, both in terms of finishes, but also for me, like what makes Liverpool special for me as a football club is everything about it, but is the stadium, it's the city, it's the famous players, but it's the style of play. There's something different through the 70s and the 80s that's different about Liverpool to the rest of England. It's a conscious choice of like, we will play passing football, we will keep it on the deck, we will play attacking football, you know, regardless of who's playing in the team. And then under Souness, I feel like that declines. You get players like Julian Dix coming in, and I'm not slating Julian Dix as a footballer. Like, you know, there are plenty of players who make their careers as like tough, hard-nosed footballers. But in my mind, the amount of those that should play for Liverpool are a very small amount. And I feel like under Evans, there's a return to, I know everyone seems to have one nowadays, but like a Liverpool way. There's a return to a noticeable standard of play and a quality of play. You get young players coming through who've already, some of them got their first opportunities under Souness, like Robbie Fowler and Redknapp. But there's a real development of those players under Roy Evans. And as much as people talk about the club's culture and the Spice Boys culture and things like that, the more that I actually looked at it, I'm like, Souness, the club is declining. And whether Roy Evans takes it to the, you know, back to the peak and back onto the top of the perch is not really necessary. What I was kind of looking at is the club is stabilised. The club is brought back to something that you would look at as being Liverpool. And then the club can, from that point, return to the place where it has been before. I kind of look at it as, you know, to some extent, you know, the club might not be where it is now or where it's been for the past several years under Jurgen Klopp, if that rot that's really accelerating under Graham Souness isn't stopped by someone. And when you look at it, I believe it's stopped by Roy Evans.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've talked to quite a few players. I mean, with Ray Houghton, he was having one of the best goal scoring seasons. He scored 12 that season, his last season, and you know, he was only 29, 30. And Souness just cut him. So
there's so many players that Souness decides to move out. One of the big features, the first chapter of the book goes through pretty much Souness's reign, and kind of, because I try and do the whole thing's chronological, the whole thing's trying to, from like a historical point of view, tell the story. So the first chapter covers Souness's reign, and there's a lot of analysis of like where things go wrong, the mistakes he makes. The biggest thing for me is he sells Peter Beardsley to Everton as well, which is, there's several ridiculous things about that. Beardsley's already starting to be phased out by Dalglish. It's not like Dalglish is playing him week in, week out, and Souness just goes, nah, not for me. But Souness makes a much quicker decision though of being like, right, he's gonna move out. He sells him to Everton. Howard Kendall openly admitted he never in a million years thought that Peter Beardsley would be available. Just never in a million years did he think, and certainly not for Everton. And then what's amazing is that Souness then seems to spend the next 2-3 years trying to replace Peter Beardsley. You know, it brings in Dean Saunders, brings in Nigel Clough, both of whom are decent players. I mean, Nigel Clough was, I think, post-peak at that point anyway, and I think had a bit of a bad run in terms of his Liverpool career. But Dean Saunders is no Peter Beardsley. You know, coming from the North East, there's a special appreciation for that man up in the North East anyway. But, you know, he seems to spend the rest of his tenure trying to replace that link between midfield and attack that just doesn't exist. And it's like, yeah, because you sold it, you idiot. That's the, he seems to upset John Barnes. Barnes is forever injured as well. That's a real problem for Souness as well. McManaman's in and out of form, but he plays McManaman out on the wing. Whereas Roy Evans very quickly identifies that Steve McManaman's best position is in the middle of the pitch, going wherever the hell McManaman wants to go. Just being the creative genius that McManaman was. I don't think he gets anywhere near enough credit for how good a footballer he was. But yeah, there's so much stuff where he moves players out or upsets players, Souness does, that Evans then later tries to solve.
Yeah, I think Souness's man management was not very good at all.
Well, a big part of, I mean, he got the job because rightly he'd done a really good job at Rangers. You know, no one can say otherwise. You know, when he got to Rangers, Celtic had been pretty much the dominant team, along with the other non-old firm teams as well in the early 80s. You've got Aberdeen under Alex Ferguson. You know, there's not just Celtic, but he does then take Rangers back to the top and they go on their run of, I think it's 9, isn't it? 9 league titles Rangers win, obviously not all under Souness. But Walter Smith is a really big part of that. You know, there's a reason why when Souness leaves, Rangers don't just suddenly collapse. You know, it doesn't suddenly just hit the fan because Graham Souness is gone. And if anything, the team becomes a little bit more stable post Souness. So I think that's the element. You know, you said the man management leaves a lot to be desired. I think that's where Souness is probably great as a player. You know, could fire up the rest of the dressing room. But, you know, you've got Bob Paisley, you've got, you know, Fagan to calm everything down.
Yeah, I you know, you always need that player, you know, to get everybody riled up. But massive difference between being a manager, you know, player and a manager, as we all know, you know, with Stevie as well, you know, how well he did at Rangers and then comes to Villa and just completely bombs. It's just different for him. But there's so much different between Souness and then, you know, the calming, you know, of Roy Evans. You know, you've also got the last of the boot room as well. You know, that's bringing nostalgia back. I always thought Roy was a fantastic addition to you know, Liverpool Football Club. Not just playing, but, you know, manager wise as well. He brought calmness. You know, obviously not the trophies we were longing for, but just a better day-to-day operation. I thought.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I agree with you totally, and that's a huge part of the book. Really, is it's not about, yes, there's the League Cup win, But it's not about that really. It's about the fact that, like, yes, there were, by the time that Evans goes, like, it's probably time that he went. I don't think he went at the wrong time. I think he probably went at the right time. Things were starting to tail off, but he stabilizes that club. He really does. And when you talk to anyone who's had any involvement with him, anyone at the club, like, no one has a bad word to say about Roy Evans. Like, I've never, like, in the whole thing of writing the book, of talking to anyone at the club, want to do with any Liverpool media, no one has a bad word to say about him. And it's for that reason. He was the calming influence, like you said, the last member of the boot room to manage the club. And that's it, it's connecting to that, what was starting to feel like a lost identity. Because, as you know, you can have people say, oh, Dalglish wasn't a member of the boot room. Fair, but Dalglish had also been around that club for so long and was different to Souness in terms of, I think, his attachment to the club. And Roy had been a part of Dalglish's staff as well. There was that connection to the great days of the club and what I think the club should be. I think Liverpool stands for more than just, like, if we talked about Manchester City before we came on, like, whatever the Gallagher brothers say, that club to me stands for nothing. As much as I appreciate everything that Guardiola does, I think he's an incredible coach that's had more of an impact on modern football than most. That club stands for nothing. Like Chelsea, it's a plastic club. It's a plaything of the rich and famous. I went to City it was the first season they won the title under Guardiola. And I remember, like, I was there to see them against Napoli at that point under Maurizio Sarri, two of the best footballing teams in the whole of Europe at that point. The Napoli fans that were the away fans made way more noise. And to me, like, that's when I'm saying, like, Liverpool means more. It kind of represents more. And I think that's where the club got back to that. Whether the club's playing well or not, throughout the whole period, any games that I watched, Anfield's loud. There were so many great moments, but Anfield's loud. The club means something. It's identifiable as Liverpool, whereas under Souness it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with Roy too, with the younger players, he'd put an arm around them, while Souness would probably, I don't know, Graham, but from just what I've read, and I've had mates, their dads tell me stories. He's very stoic. He's very, just one-dimensional. While Roy puts his arm around the young lads. If they had a bad game, it'll be all right. We'll get you back next game and stuff. And I think maybe that was a bit of his downfall as well, that he was a bit of a softie,
I think that's the interesting thing, because I think when we're saying about, like, Souness, I think that's probably why him and Walter Smith worked really well, because you've got Walter Smith, good cop. Again, I don't know Walter Smith, and I certainly don't know the ins and outs of Rangers Football Club at the time, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. But the way that I always looked at it as an outsider, it's like you've got, Souness is definitely bad cop in that scenario. And I think that's the thing with Evans. I think it's certainly, like, Roy Evans, it certainly works really well at first. He's that short, put an arm around them, exactly like you say. The first half of the season, the end of 93, 94 is not good. And it doesn't look like it's going well. The start of the next season, we get to the 3-5-2 and things really pick up. He does bring on the young players, and when they're young, it really makes a massive difference. You see the ones for me that always jump out that he had a really massive impact on. Robbie Fowler. I always say, like, Robbie Fowler is the greatest finisher I've ever seen on a football pitch. I don't mean he was the greatest striker or anything like that, but genuinely, I think in terms of, like, if you put him one-on-one with the goalkeeper, 8 yards out, it's going in the back of the net. He'll find a way to finish it. McManaman, he really developed McManaman. He was a winger under Souness, right and left, kind of mostly on the right. There's the great goal he scores in the FA Cup final from the right-hand side, coming in and shooting with his left. But and Redknapp as well. I always think Jamie Redknapp would be a great player in the modern game. Much like there was kind of like a dearth of really great passing midfielders in the late 1990s, as football became in this country, especially quite combative in the middle of the park. I think now, if you had Jamie Redknapp, he'd have been a fantastic like passing midfielder in a possession style team. Probably a player that actually would make a massive difference in the current team. But I agree with you. I think
he's like a Thiago, back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
He's our luxury player.
Yeah. But I think you're right. As time goes on, there's perhaps and the 90s were a period, and I do refer to this because I come back, I talk about the Suits, I talk about the Spice Boys thing, and like so much of it, I think is like, yes, the players like, and there's lots of talk of the players got up the stuff, like, and I'm not saying that they didn't. I'm not saying that at times they didn't take the mick. There's the talk, isn't there, about them passing the pound coin around as they were playing. There's the Suits, there's all this kind of stuff, and going out and enjoying all this. But this is the thing, like, it's not like they were the only players doing that. It's not like it was the only club where this happened. Arsenal had a renowned drinking culture, like so much so that Tony Adams had to go and have treatment for alcoholism. Paul Merson had, substance abuse problems. It's not like it was just a Liverpool problem. And I kind of try and talk about the fact that I think it was a 1990s thing. I remember watching, what was it called? The Class of 92 did a thing, a DVD about like their time at United. And Ryan Giggs says something in the middle of that DVD where he says, they used to always say to him when he would come back to training the next day, if he was clean shaven, they knew that he'd been out in town. So they would have a go at him. And Ryan Giggs just decided I just stopped shaving if I was going out. So it's not like this kind of stuff wasn't happening at other clubs. The players were perhaps just a bit smarter. But so like I can't say the Spice Boys thing is completely unwarranted. But I also think it's a product of its time. You've got footballers really at that point as well, going from just footballers to celebrities. You're a few years away from David Beckham being one of the most identifiable people in the whole wide world. Michael Jordan in the mid-1990s is one of the most identifiable people in the world, and he just bounces a ball for a living. I think it's a cultural thing in the 90s. I'm not saying that there was nothing. I'm not saying that the players didn't take the mick at times, but I just don't think it was a solely Liverpool thing either.
Well, they started to become footballers, like you said, just started to become more fashionable, just the way they dressed. People would look at footballers the way they dress, and then you'd see it in the streets. You'd started to dress like footballers. Haircuts, the curtains. We all.
I wanted when Beckham had that stupid blonde Mohican thing for the 2002 World Cup. Oh man, I was so annoyed my parents wouldn't let me have my hair like that. And now I look back and I'm like, thank God they didn't let me.
At least you totally right. Wanted that one. I had the perm in the back in the 80s, 87, 88. I actually got my sister to put a perm in the back. That's how bad I wanted to look like. Who was it that had it? Oh, it was Newcastle boy, Chris Waddle.
Oh, Waddle.
Waddle
had some fantastic haircuts because he had a mullet as well. He had the mullet. Time.
And then there was some kind of perm. I thought it was a perm, and I was like, oh, I want that. Because I wore the Grandad shirt as well, with the baggies. Yeah. And my sister did that, and I was like, oh my God. I look back and go, what were you thinking? But again, I looked at footballers, and that's what I want. Yeah. So the 90s started to change. They were looked at differently, on and off the pitch. I think that's where, the horrendous, Wembley, the horrendous suits just come out and
I was literally about to mention that.
Yeah, just come.
I mean, they are awful. Like they are awful. There are some players that I would say pull them off a lot better than others. I can't remember who it is. In fact, is it on there? Yeah, it's Redknapp. Redknapp wears white shoes, and I
Hmm.
think that makes them look better because the rest of them are wearing like brown or black shoes with a white, like a cream suit. Looks dreadful. Um, I mean, the whole thing is like I again like in my day job, I'm a teacher, so I remember saying to my pupils that like I showed them it the white suits, and I was like in the 1990s, this was really daring. Like for footballers to wear this was like really controversial. It's looked at as like it's one of the reasons why they lost that final, not the fact that the performance is atrocious. That is one of the most boring games of football I have ever watched. The 95-96 Cup final. It's dreadful. Um, but like they're shocked that it was in any way like really controversial because like we're saying nowadays, maybe not as like horrifically garish, but they will see footballers or NBA players or NFL players or whatever. They'll turn up to the stadiums wearing like, relatively stylish or risky stuff and things like that. And it's just not really, you don't bat an eyelid nowadays, whereas obviously back then it was horrifically daring. Everything that I've ever found out about it was that it was linked to David James. David James had done modelling for Armani, as many of the players had started to. Like we're saying, like footballers are starting to be looked at as celebrities. People are starting to notice what footballers wear. And it was a sponsorship deal. I think the players thought it would be a laugh. It would be a bit stupid. There was some of them that took it a bit more seriously than others. There were some that didn't really want to, but did it because they were part of the team. Ian Rush in some of the pictures, Ian Rush looks incredibly uncomfortable as he stood there in a cream suit in Wembley. But I only think it really matters because like United are there and United, all business kind of reflecting kind of the Ferguson era at United. It's all business. It's all about results. It's all about the team, and they're in their like black. I think they wear like black jackets, grey trousers, black shoes. It's the club tie. It's very, very, very like standard, official, not flash at all. And I think that kind of comparison makes it stand out even more. Not that I'm defending it. I would never wear them in a billion years, but then I wouldn't have the confidence to. So I kind of give the players credit for doing so.
Well, I mean, even then, though, I mean, their ties weren't all the way up.
Yeah.
If you notice on quite a number of players, like, years gone by, it would be strictly ties, nicely done,
Yeah.
Top button, make sure it's buttoned. There was this just like laziness about it,
Yeah,
just,
I get that.
I've got this white suit on and I look like, a peppermint. It was horrendous. And yeah, I mean, the game itself was even worse, which is hard to do when you're wearing a suit that looks like that. But
Well, because it's like there's the loss. Because if it had been a dreadful game, but Liverpool had won, people would look back and the suits be talked about quite fondly because it'd be like, hey, look at the stupid things we won when we beat United. But the performance is horrific. Like I think Roy Keane got man of the match, I want to say, because Roy Keane genuinely like marshals midfield the whole way through. Liverpool can't play through him at all, and it's just like it's a dreadful, dreadful game. Like I remember because like there are certain games that I made sure that I watched the entirety of, and I spend more time dedicated to them in the book. Two of them are three of them that always stand out to me when I go back through the book is the League Cup final because that's the one trophy that's won, so I have to dedicate time to that. The first 4-3 against Newcastle in 95-96 with Collier Moore's like last minute winner because just it's the best game in the history of the Premier League and it deserved all the attention that I gave it. And then that cup final because it was just just an awful, awful, awful game. Like for 90 minutes, I wrote notes, but it was depressing notes, put it that way.
Well, you had to watch it again then, didn't you?
Yeah.
See, I only watched it once, and I actually, as you did back in the day, you spent, the morning, watching the beginning,
The thing, yeah.
all day, your family would make the sandwiches and stuff, and us kids would get to have a half and half.
The FA Cup misses that now so much, by the way.
Well, I wish I could use the words that my granddad said when he saw those lads in white suits, but I won't, because you will probably ban me. Or my granddad had a few choice words and spat out his Guinness. But yeah,
I suppose you couldn't see a Bob Paisley side doing that, and a Kenny Dalglish would never have let them do that. Like I suppose that's the side of Roy Evans that I suppose we were talking about before.
Yeah, it was like the changing of the guard for me granddad. He was like, "What is this?" And for me,
yeah, I get that.
I was a teenager and I was like, that's. I was kind of like, that's what they're wearing these days, granddad. Even though I was like, nobody's wearing that crap. But my granddad was just like, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. And then, when we lost, he was even like more upset. And he did. He was like blaming, just like, he's like, these footballers these days. And if he was still alive today, he'd probably have a lot more to say about these footballers, with the extra activities and fashion and all that. It's just straight football and that was it.
Like, you're there to do a job, like turn up, and that's, I suppose, like that's the kind of thing that like players like Souness would talk about, like Souness, and like it's the same kind of thing like Roy Keane. Like Roy Keane is constantly mocked, isn't he, on when he was on Sky Sports I'd be like, when he's on Sky Sports for like, that's your job, just do it. Like when keepers make great saves, and he's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, but I suppose like that's the generational thing of like, actually, you're there to do a job, just like every other people go and work down the pit or go and do whatever factory 9 to 5. That's your job as well. Do it. But I suppose that's as like I say, England and Britain is changing through the 90s, and I suppose that's the massive clash where you've got the old generation and the new generation, and then you've got players like this that are the start of the new generation, but are perhaps pushing it quite far for what the old. I mean, I remember when David Beckham was on, I think it was on his honeymoon or something, or on holiday with Victoria Beckham, and he was photographed in a sarong. And I remember like everyone at the time being like, what's Beckham wearing a skirt for? And nowadays, obviously, like, players, I'm not saying they all go around wearing skirts, but they're certainly a lot more daring in terms of their fashion and things like that. Mm-hmm. Things have changed, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, my granddad always would be like, footballers need to be proud. And I think when he saw that and the lads taking the mick on the pitch before in their suits, they're just laughing. He was like, nah, they need to, take this serious. And it has football's changed, My granddad probably would be one of those fellas that sits outside in his rocking chair and like get off my grass and all that stuff. He's just that type, I would always see my granddad dressed to the nines, during the week, always, if he didn't have the suit on, he'd have a tie and shirt.
Yeah,
always. And I think that I think he thought Liverpool let him down, or the players did, and I think that's where the generational gap started, because
it's making a mockery of the club.
Yeah, like his favourite was Roger Hunt, which
oh yeah,
amazing footballer, but not of my generation. So I didn't have a connection there. And then my connection was, it started with Kevin Keegan in the 70s, but it was more, when I hit, being 15, 16, 17, was the John Barnes, was that.
God, I love that team.
Oh God, it's just to me, that team of 87, 88, 89 probably was the closest to what
that's going to be
Klopp had in the last couple of years, because they both played absolutely amazing football,
Yeah.
And there hasn't been anything in between. It's Suarez, to me, amazing footballer, but not in an amazing team. You got your Sturridge, but not in an amazing team like we've had the last couple of seasons with Klopp, and then the 87, 88, 89 teams. So yeah, it's just to go back and just I can remember just me granddad just being mad for like 3 hours. He just couldn't get over it. He was just like, they're making a mockery of my team, your team, Darren. Yeah. I was like, it is my team, but they look like
to support it. Yeah,
they look
like. I do understand that, because it does feel like it's weird, because the club, the team is closer to winning the title, much closer to winning the title the next season, much, much, much closer. It's ridiculous. It's the season, 96, 97 is the season. My best mate worded it amazingly after he read the book, because I nicely gave him one of my free copies. And he said to me, it's the season that it's like Liverpool come third in a 2-horse race. And it's it's like Liverpool, lead the league for quite a significant part of the season, and somehow just completely collapse at the end. And that word, in the modern season, this season has been thrown around a lot to describe Arsenal, bottlers. But there is, to some extent, Liverpool. I'm not saying that they bottle it completely in 96, 97, but to some extent, it's noticeable in a lot of the seasons, especially post from the FA Cup final kind of onwards. Actually, I was going to say it's a little bit of a turning point in the book and in the story of Everton's tenure. Really, is although the club does continue to go higher up the table, that thing of either dropping points in ridiculously stupid times or bottling big games is something that comes back. The fact but then they'll win big games ridiculous. They'll beat United when it doesn't matter. The amount of times that Liverpool will beat United, there's in one of the first seasons, they stopped United from winning the league. But it just doesn't matter. And it seems like so much through the 80s is Liverpool lose at the worst times, drop points at the worst times. And that FA Cup final is the first really big example of not turning up in a big game, just not turning up. Everything about the style of play just doesn't come through in that game. And it does seem like a bit of a turning point in that things are never quite the same after. Style of play is never quite the same. I think after that as well, he seems to want to shore up the midfield a little bit, which is so criticised. And that's something I talk about as well in the book, is that the midfield so often got criticised, and the defence got criticised for being lightweight, for letting in loads of goals. When you actually look, one of Liverpool's biggest problems, yes, there are times where the defence was leaky, but nowhere near as much as you would think. Actually, one of the biggest problems is that when you look at goals scored, quite often, and especially in the middle of the 1990s, United score loads, Newcastle score loads, Arsenal score a decent amount, but are ridiculously stingy at the back, as Wenger kind of gets his grips into that team. Liverpool's biggest problem is they just don't score enough. They do not score enough. And for a team that has, and as I rightly attach to them, this reputation of being a ridiculously entertaining football team. Like I said, both 4-3s against Newcastle are two of the most entertaining games probably in the history of English football. For a team that scores so many so often, when you get to the end of the season, the amount of times where you look at the goals scored and it's not that high. And the reason why, and I come back to this so often, is that there's just no one else consistently other than Robbie Fowler. Fowler is incredible, scores so many great goals, leads the team in scoring, but then you've got no one else consistently. You've got Collymore in 95, 96 is fantastic as a secondary gunner. Before that, you've got Ian Rush. Rush settles into this role when Evans comes in. Rush settles into this amazing role of being like the number 2 to Fowler, and seems to be okay with that and really plays like a number 2 role, and he's brilliant at it. And then after 95, 96, Collymore is inconsistent. You get like Karl-Heinz Riedler, who is inconsistently, well, no, actually, like consistently does not score very many. Then you get Michael Owen, who comes in, but then by that point, fitting him and Fowler into the team is a nightmare, because the whole thing of why Collymore and Fowler worked is that Collymore would sacrifice himself for Fowler and Rush would sacrifice himself for Fowler, whereas Owen and Fowler are like both alphas effectively. They're both the leading scorer, and neither really would sacrifice for the other, not in a selfish way. Just their styles of play didn't work in a way where one could sacrifice for the other. And then Fowler then gets injured and is sadly never the same player after that knee injury. And then Owen gets injured not long after the book finishes. That's a huge problem, is that they're never able to supplement Fowler's goals. And it means that in the games where Fowler isn't on top form, Liverpool drop points. And that tends to be the games where they stupidly drop points against like bottom of the table. And the amount of times it happens where they drop points against teams that are lower down in the table because Fowler's just not at the races, the team aren't clicking that game, and it costs them in the end. Like, especially 96, 97, it really costs them.
Yeah, it must have been really, really tough for Roy as well, with the 4 years managing Liverpool, and then, Houllier is starting to come in, and then you've got the ridiculous let's manage together. Like,
he knew it was a bad idea. Like, yeah. He knew it was a stupid idea. And he said, like, he went ahead with it because he was asked to. But, like, it was never going to work. They both had very different ideas. I forget the name. There's a player that they bring in together. And I think it's Evans. Evans sees him as a right back. Houllier sees him as a right midfielder. And they're just like that in itself is just a small example of why it was never going to work. You take one player and it says a lot about like the sort of ethos of both managers. Evans sees, he's an attacking player. Let's play him at right back. Kind of like what he did with McAteer. He's a box-to-box midfielder. Let's play him at right back and have him go up and down the right flank constantly from wing back. That's a small example of why it was never going to work. The players said that they never knew really who do you go to? When you need to talk about something, who do you go to? Because just by the nature of bringing someone in, Evans had been emasculated there anyway, I suppose, in the eyes of the players. If we're saying that part of the issue was that the players thought that Roy could be a bit too much of a soft touch, doing that cuts his legs out from underneath him already. And again, this is not me saying anything bad about Gerard Houllier. Gerard Houllier talks kind of like me in a way, like not from Liverpool, but like talks about Liverpool, the city and the club, like in such glowing terms that he talks about when he came to Liverpool, not as a manager, not as a player, and talks about how he developed a connection to the club, much in kind of the same way that I think of like my attachment to the club, which is falling in love with a city and a football club. But it just was never going to work. And by the time that Roy decides to step aside, it's the right call, because it's just not working. they wanted a sort of like a director of football type thing from Houllier. And that was never going to work either, because in the 1990s, that thing just didn't work, because the manager was looked at as kind of, the old school thing of, you're the bloke who makes the decisions. You're the bloke who's in charge of the football club, basically. Whereas nowadays, we're totally fine that someone's just been brought in who's going to help Klopp recruit players this summer. We're absolutely fine with that, because we recognise that it's not all down to Jurgen in terms of bringing in the players to revitalise this team. The players we've been linked with today already interest me. But, Houllier and Evans, it was never going to work. And Evans recognised that. And like I say, when Evans leaves, he leaves because it's the right time and it's the right thing to do for the football club moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Which again says a lot about him as a man. Like, he didn't stay because he wanted to keep collecting the paycheck. He stepped down because he recognised, like, this is going to break the football club if I stay here. Like, they've brought in Houllier. The board clearly want to move forward with Gerard Houllier. Let's let him have his time and see how things go. I've had my time. I won a League Cup, stabilise the club. Let's move on, kind of thing.
Yeah, I just think it was sad because that was the closed, basically, chapter on the boot room.
Boot rooms, yeah, and from that point on, it's never come back. And it's like, I do think it's an ethos of the club that I think Jurgen's looking to like associate himself with, in terms of, like, I think that's a big reason why he wanted Steven Gerrard in, when he was in his early stages of coaching, have him as part of the club. I think that's probably something that long term he will look to do and have former players involved. Firmino on his way out talked about, maybe he'll come back to the club as a player in a few years, maybe he'll have changed position or something like that. I think Firmino could play central midfield, but that's another thing down the line, maybe. But he also said, like, maybe when I'm coaching, I could come back. So I do think that's, again, we talk about Liverpool being a special club and there being something about Liverpool. I think that's something that the club could really look to bring back a little bit. Not in the same way that happened with Man United, because it looked like that was just like, at United, it just seemed like that was like jobs for the boys. I don't mean anything like that, but I do think it's important to have people at the club that understand the football club. Otherwise you become just like any other football club, and Liverpool can never become like that.
Yeah, well, that's why I was sad, really, to see Milner go, because I think he obviously he thinks he has a few more years left in him. He's the fittest 37-year-old I've probably ever seen. He's won the lactate test.
Yeah.
Every single season since he's been at Liverpool, but he's another one that I hope comes back to Liverpool and coaches, because I think he can go on to be an amazing manager as well. And
yeah, agreed.
We can look at everybody, number one, everyone on their lips would say Stevie, obviously. Who will follow Klopp? Is it Stevie? Well, obviously, with not doing so well at Villa, he needs to get back.
Question that now. Yeah.
The next couple of years, he needs to make the right choice. And
his next job's huge. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Can I see Stevie being Liverpool manager? I actually can't. I would pick.
I could have. I could have. But I would question if you couldn't get it done at a club like Aston Villa. Can you really take on a job as big as Liverpool? Yes, you can have the right people around you. And yeah, you know what? Maybe Stevie goes and, gets a job either at it depends where he goes next. Do you either go for a top championship club and look to bring them up, or do you look to try and, rescue a team that's in danger of relegation and show that you can really, recover a club? And then maybe, but I think certainly his route to become a Liverpool manager became a lot more difficult when he showed. And there's a lot of like stuff that came out of Aston Villa around like tactical not ineptitude. I don't want to say that because I wasn't in Aston Villa. I don't know anyone from Aston Villa or anything, but I heard lots of stuff on, from the media around real criticisms of a lack of tactical flexibility and maturity on his part. In terms of Milner, like I do think like Milner, I mean, firstly, the fact that Milner's been picked up by Brighton says a lot. Like Brighton's recruitment team, as we've all seen, are incredible, do incredible work. So the fact that they've picked him up is a good sign in terms of like, can he still play at the top level? He'll play a role. I can see him playing like the right back role that Caicedo has had to play, where like they've had that right back that comes in for Brighton. I can see him doing that. But in terms of like bringing him as a coach, like so much of Milner's game was predicated on hard work and just like effort and graft. And actually, like when I think of like Klopp's style of play, I think of hard work and graft and effort. And actually, like if that ends up feeding into his tactical identity, like either way, like as a coach, if he become, and I think Milner would be a good coach because he just seems as a leader of men without sounding really corny. I think he could step into that role no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, obviously Brighton are probably thinking the same thing that, I was thinking as well. You bring in this amazing football player who's 37 and Brighton have a young team and you have these young footballers watch James Milner in training every day and going,
it's an example,
as hard as he does. And I'm 21 and he's 37.
Yeah, why am I not doing that? Yeah, it's a good point, actually. Yeah,
I think
players like Mitoma. Yeah,
I think that's what Liverpool will miss, and I think a lot of people miss kind of the boat on that. They were like, "Why?" I mean, if you go on the Twitter there, you've got people going, "Why does Klopp want to give him an extra year?" And then turn around when the club said no, and then start arguing like, well, Klopp was going to get him, and the club overruled him. I'm pissed. I'm like, well, which is it? I mean, for me, keeping James Milner for another year is only a good thing.
Yeah. So for me, like I wasn't up in arms when Milner was, when the call was made to let him go. However, having said that, the club is going to be going through, in terms of some of the playing staff, quite a considerable change this summer. Most change the club's had in quite some time. So actually having Milner there, I mean, there are other leaders. It's not like Milner's the sole leader in the dressing room, but having Milner there as a leader to kind of have these new players come in and be like, look, this is how we do things at Liverpool Football Club. Again, it's not like there's not those players. You've got Van Dijk, you've got Salah. You have got those players and obviously Hendo, you've got those players to come in and be like, this is the standard we expect. But you can't have too many leaders at a football club. So I do get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be an interesting summer. But
I can't wait for the first game next season. I can't wait.
See, I was so done with this season about January. I was absolutely done with it. And, out of 6 seasons, having one bad season, you're like, okay, but it was frustrating because I think we all know there is a team still there. I mean, everybody goes, Hendo's done, Fabinho's done, but all you need to do is watch the last 10 games of the season and see that they're not done. It's just lots of different things caused this problem, not getting a few fresh faces in during the summer, having all these muscle injuries, having the World Cup. You know, I know every other team has had the same issue. I get it, but
I agree, though.
It's coming so close. I mean, I think one of the issues as being a football supporter is we forgot they're human beings as well.
Yeah.
And as Van Dijk said, he's like, you think we're robots and we're not. We have feelings. We came so close to winning everything. I mean, as a football fan, I was done after last season. You know, mentally and physically, I was absolutely drained. Imagine being the players.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you're saying like the World Cup, you know, and stuff like that, like made it the same for everyone. Like the thing about Liverpool is Liverpool's style of play, as everyone knows, like is so focused on pressing, on hard work. If Liverpool's pressing, as we've seen, if Liverpool's pressing isn't on, like, because I wouldn't say that the players are the most naturally defensively gifted players ever in terms of like sitting back and just stopping things. So much of it comes from that cohesive team approach. And if the pressing isn't as good from Moore, from Firmino, from, you know, when it was, you know, Gakpo, from Diaz, anyone from Darwin who's playing in the front three, if the pressing's not as good there, it's going to have knock-on impacts. And I feel like that's happened all season. The pressing's not been there, so the team hasn't been there. As a result, then there's, you know, the defence has been poorer. Virgil van Dijk has looked so much more exposed. I do worry about Van Dijk. I think there's stuff from this season that does worry me in terms of like a drop off. But I'm hoping that given a summer to recover and recuperate, that things will hopefully, he'll be the normal Van Dijk again next season. But what I was going to say was, you know, for a style of play that's so focused on pressing, to then have a season where, like we say, we're going for everything, right? And, you know, didn't get so many. Then having a World Cup, so you've then got a shortened summer for the World Cup. You've played late because you've got all the way until the Champions League final. Then you come back early. Then you've got a World Cup. So then you're not really having as much of a break around winter or around whatever as you normally would have. I think that naturally causes it. I think it can only be noticed that Liverpool started to perform better towards the end of the season. Because perhaps then you almost get, like, for lack of better words, like second wind as you get in towards the end of the season. Liverpool were noticeably better. When Liverpool were in like the big games, performance, like, you know, the classic thing is against United at Anfield, you know, that performance was notably better. The pressing was noticeably better. You know, I think so much of this season is circumstance. I do think there's an element of which changes do need to be made. But I agree with you. I think it's about measured changes. Like the players that we've been linked with today in terms of the midfield, I think will only be a help. You know, Kone, I've seen us linked with from Mönchengladbach. There's Thuram, isn't there, from Nice. Like these look like players that will fit in with what we think of as a Klopp team. So having those small changes, hopefully next season, good to go again.
Well, hopefully by the time this episode goes out, which is probably a week, McAllister's already signed, which will be great.
I've seen that like daily.
Yeah, I'm just like, just put a picture of him, or not a picture, a proper picture of him at Liverpool signing. Yeah. You know, I think we've gone through it. You know, this past summer, the Bellingham saga. You know, Tuchemene. Yeah. You know, we get excited and then we get let down or something. You know, I'm on the. You know, Bellingham is. I can't really say he's generational talent because I haven't really seen too much of him. His World Cup wasn't the greatest World Cup. You know, now there's a knee issue with him. And
that would be the thing that would jump out at me. What is he now? Is he like 21?
19.
Right. Yeah. Like, and he's already had a few problems. Like, I totally get from Real, because it obviously looks like he's off to Real, doesn't it? Like, Madrid's point of view, you've got all the cash in the world. You couldn't buy Mbappe last season, so you've got a fair amount of cash knocking around. They need midfielders because Modric and Kroos can't go on forever. So, and they want to bring in named players, right? And as much as everyone, I think the time to sign Bellingham wasn't this summer. I think that time had passed. I think, say, last summer or the summer before, there was definitely a chance to sign Bellingham. He seemed to want to stay at Dortmund and develop at Dortmund, perhaps understandably. But then this summer, he's had a really good season for Dortmund. Dortmund themselves have, again, collapsed at the end, but had a really good season. That is the ultimate in bottling it, if we're talking about bottling it.
It is.
Dear God. But, at that point, I think it's then difficult to get him. I really do. And again, if you're Jude Bellingham, you're making the move that hopefully is going to make your career, and Liverpool haven't made the Champions League. That's just going to factor into that decision, isn't it?
Well, the crazy thing is too, though, he's only 20. He could go to Madrid till he's 24 and then go to Liverpool.
It's not like it's done. Yeah,
it's not like it's done. I think the media made so much of this. I don't think, and I've said it so many times, I don't think FSG or Klopp ever said they were in for Bellingham.
I think a thing
Klopp has said, he appreciates the lad.
He said they needing midfielders.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me is when we saw the price tag that supposedly was going to be I remember 130 million was mentioned. I mean, in the end, I've seen so many prices rumored for what Madrid are paying. Sorry, I've seen 90 million plus a whole bunch of add-ons and stuff like that. Which I saw people complaining and going, supposedly we were out because it was 130 million. But then, for me, the big thing about the whole team that we've seen the FSG and we've seen Klopp and the whole recruitment team build. That whole team wasn't built around, right, let's just go and splash a whole bunch of cash. That, yes, people go Van Dijk, but Van Dijk is the one. Van Dijk is the one where Liverpool went out and were right, we have to get him. We have to get him. And they went out and got him. And I remember when he was bought, there was people going, that's a lot of money for Virgil van Dijk. And in the end, they were proved very wrong. So it's not like FSG won't spend if needed to, but it has to be on the right player. The majority of the team has actually been built around spending astutely, getting players of a certain age range that can then grow, which Bellingham would have fit, but price range-wise, Bellingham didn't fit that. The players that were today and, over the last few weeks being linked with, like Kone, like Thuram, like McAllister. McAllister will be more expensive, but I think he's worth that. I really do. Caicedo has been linked again. Caicedo's linked with everybody because he's just Kante Mark II. We've been linked with. I've seen Romeo Lavia at Southampton, who looks like one of the better players in that team. Yuri Tielemans, again, there's just the list of players is this, but they do all seem to fit that, whoever it is that we go for from that list, it's the list of players that fit what I think Liverpool tend to do in terms of their recruitment policy.
Yeah, I mean, we have to trust in Klopp. I mean, he's brought us so much success, and just like any manager, they can be criticised. But, had this conversation yesterday, it just seems that, when everything kind of goes bad, FSG get blamed. But when everything goes good, nobody says anything about FSG.
Yeah, it's all Jurgen. Yeah.
But they're the ones that appointed him. They're the ones that pay his wages. Jurgen's done miracles. Well, he's been paid to kind of do that. It's not like he's getting 10 quid So, I trust in the man, still have a lot of faith in him. And I just think, he thought Tchouaméni was the one. I think he was going for Tchouaméni, to be honest, rather than Bellingham. This
and it's not like there's never a chance that'll happen. I mean, there was rumors I saw like weeks back about him not being as happy at Madrid and all this stuff. That seems to have died down in recent weeks and stuff like that. But it's not like it could never happen. It's not like a young player has ever got forced out or got unhappy at Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that football club's a circus, often in a really good and fun way, but it is a circus, where, they'll let players go who, like, I remember when they let like Arya and Robben go, who then went on to be unreal for Bayern Munich. And it's like, it's a glamour club, isn't it? It's a great club, but it's a glamour club.
Yeah. All I ask, Klopp, if we reach another final, don't let anyone wear white suits. That's it. And white suits in football, period. Never again. It's just a horrible thing in everybody's minds. But where can we purchase your book? I know Amazon.
It'll be on. Yeah, it'll be on Amazon. It's available on Waterstones as well. It's available in Waterstones in Liverpool as well. It's also available in Smiths as well, and Smiths in Liverpool as well. So it's available in plenty of places. If you go on Pitch Publishing's website, you'll be able to get links to it as well, where you'll be able to see that. I've literally just had my second book. I've had permission for my second book come through from Pitch as well, which is going to be on the 87-88 team as well. So there'll be more from me coming as well about Liverpool, because I get to go back to the city as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And also as well, in August, I'm back in Liverpool as well, because I'm doing an event in Waterstones in Liverpool 1, along with John Gibbons from Anfield Rap as well.
Oh, sounds well. Congratulations on the first book. Hopefully, as I said, first of many. Second one, I'm sure will be even better than the first. But Jonathan, I really appreciate you coming on, spending. It's crazy how the time goes by. It's already an hour 15 of just chatting.
Yeah.
Talking about your book, talking about Liverpool Football Club. I can talk about Liverpool every single day of the week, every hour. It just makes me happy. Bad season, but we go again and we see where we're at next season.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it'll be a lot better next season too.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Please like and subscribe. I will put down the links for Jonathan's book. So please go out, get a copy. You won't be disappointed, and tune in next time.